Welcome into the Nittany Game Week podcast. I'm Todd Sadowski alongside Jay Paterno and Tom Bradley, former Penn State Nittany Lions assistant coaches. And well, we got a lot to talk about just a couple of weeks in, and they didn't even play last week. So let's start with that. They didn't play last week. Mid-September, after 2 weeks, a bye. Kind of strange, very rare, but gives you some time to accomplish a few things. What would you guys be concentrating on a bye week in mid-September?
Well, I think coming off the Bowling Green game, there are some things that happened in that game that would concern you, which we talked about. We talked about in the show. We talked about last week. I think those are things you want to work on. Like, was that an aberration, or is that a sign of something maybe that needs to be worked on? I think that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, you're not worried about game planning or doing anything like that. This is the time, hey, let's go back and look. I know defensively, get off blocks, run to the ball, proper angles, tackling makes up for a lot of bad calls, okay? Believe me.
Yeah, so it's really working on the fundamental football. I know Coach said they got a lot of recruiting done early in the year. They got a lot done with the players a little deeper on the depth chart, give them some more work. So there's always time to get stuff accomplished when you have so many bodies, you have so much going on to get yourself ready. Now, you mentioned game planning. Are you going to game plan Kent State that much? I mean, of course, you're going to take a look and see what they've got and get ready. But as you guys have mentioned, we just recorded the show talking about more so getting you better, getting your own team better, and focusing on some of those things. So, Tom, let's go to the defensive side of it. Coach Franklin talked about a couple of things cleaning up that defense from the first half to the second half against Bowling Green. He mentioned the tackling, getting the tackling better. He mentioned the communication. That was a big one, with the communication relying too much on the headset to the one player on the field. So from a defensive standpoint, communication, whether you have the headset or you don't, you got to go 53 yards across the field from end to end to let everybody know, because not everybody's in that big huddle to
See,
talk
I still
to each
think
other.
you need the signals on the sideline so the guys in the back end can get look back, because that crowd noise gets loud. You don't hear certain things. You got to be able to communicate with just, and you got to know the gestures that each other has. Okay, in the secondary especially, they're further apart. But communication does become a big deal. And as I said before, if I could have taped the meetings when I was asking these guys, what do you guys want for this signal? And I'd be going, no, not a chance on TV, not
Certain
a
gestures
chance.
Tom did not want to make.
But the point wasn't, they had so much fun with it that they never forgot the signals, And we used to have a lot of fun in those meetings. A lot of things we can't talk about, but it was just a lot of good fun. But I think one of the things that communication is so key, because it's the one thing you have to always be on the same page.
One of the things that we did years ago, the Ohio State, they'd written a book, I think it was the 96 or 97 season, they had a great year, and I've read the book. And the guy that wrote the book talked about before Ohio State came to Penn State, they were watching our film to see what hand signals we used, because they know at home a team like Penn State on defense. So I said something to Joe, and Joe said, well, let's go out and practice with crowd noise for a home game.
Yep.
And put the crowd noise on the defensive side of the field, which no one does. A lot of people don't do that. And for me, it was fun because on the offensive side, that crowd noise was the most annoying thing in the history of the world, because you're trying to communicate and you'd walk out there. You would take a bunch of Tylenol before practice because you knew it was. And I loved looking over the defensive guys, and I think it may have been Larry Johnson. He's like, this is your fault. And I said, yes, it is. And I said, I'm quite happy about that.
But you mentioned the crowd noise.
Yes.
That is definitely
a
a factor when you stand up with the
Because most
defensive
people only
part
think
of
you
it.
have to practice against when you're playing away. We had to practice for it at home because of the great crowd that Penn State has and the way they're into it. We just had to do it. And we did that. It was twice a week.
Yeah. And when they motion, linebackers got to let the other linebacker know. No. I go with them. The guy, safety's got to let the guy down low. I got him when he goes across. Make an owner call or a banjo call, whatever it is, to decide who's going to take who. And that's important.
Another point that was made by Coach Franklin that I thought was interesting, too, is if you're spending so much time talking to your one guy on the field, your linebacker, whoever it is, and they've got to turn and they've got to tell everybody what's going on, they can't look at formations quite as long. It's a little bit deeper into the play, and he's not doing pre-snap reads quite as effectively. He's not able to kind of figure out what's going on there. So whatever communication you settle on, it better happen quick, and it better get to all 11, as you mentioned, Tom, so they're on the same page.
The other thing is, too, you forget, hey, long pass, I'm coming back. He's got the signal. So I still think there's going to be communication coming in from that. I would want it as a secondary guy. I would want to know somebody that's giving me a heads up. What did we call? to help me get ready for the next play, because those guys up front, those linebackers, let's be honest, they're sucking gas sometimes. They're not exactly spitting it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's going to force you to tighten up. Probably you need to tighten up what you do. You can't do as much until you got to make sure you're not asking these guys to make too many adjustments on some of these things.
And from a rankings perspective, it's so early, you can't really worry about that stuff. But you do have to be careful about how it affects things in the future. If you're not really challenging yourself in that non-conference schedule and someone else is, Miami with an impressive win or Oregon with a win or whatever may happen when it comes to that type of stuff. So from a rankings deal, do you guys know that as a coach or as a player? Oh, we slipped from 8 to 10. Do you care? At this point in the season, I mean, people are going to talk about it. It's going to be in the building, so you know what's going on.
You don't really care, but I think as you start to look at this, and again, there was no 12-team playoff back then. So now you do, from a coaching standpoint, when you start to think whether you're the athletic director or the head football coach, when you start looking at your future schedules, for example, let's suppose Penn State goes, again, I hope Penn State wins every game, but let's just play out a scenario here. Penn State finishes 10-2 and loses to USC and Ohio State, for example. If USC finishes 9-3, and they're both on the border of in or out, USC having beaten them certainly is a factor, but 9-3 versus 10-2, you could argue Penn State's 10-2, but then you look at it and say USC played LSU and Notre Dame in a non-conference schedule. I think in that scenario, USC is probably in, Penn State is out. And when you look at what people are doing with their non-conference schedules, the kind of teams we are around and our peer group, so to speak, whether it's Ohio State's got home and home coming up with Texas and Alabama. Michigan has Oklahoma home and home, and they go and then they finish out the Texas series. Alabama is adding, they've got Wisconsin, they're adding Ohio State. I mean, so you look at some of the teams around the country, they're adding this one game knowing that it will pay dividends when the committee starts to say, are you the 10th team, 11th team? Because it's not a 12-team playoff, it's an 11-team playoff, because of the non-Power 4 conference champion, which right now would be Northern Illinois, would be your 12th seed.
And we just had the tournament bracket on the screen, and it's so fascinating to look at that. I mean, every week the matchups, of course, you want to be inside, right, to be able to be part of it. But this week you'd be like, we'd be going to Alabama. But 2 weeks ago, we would have been going to Texas. I mean, these are just really, really fun scenarios as we show it again. And
if
then
you look at the bracket, the team right behind Penn State that's out right now is USC. However, based on, if you're in the committee room right now, and you say, okay, Penn State beat West Virginia at West Virginia and then had a tussle with Bowling Green, and you look at USC and they say they played LSU and beat them, and then beat Utah State, I think it was 56-0 or whatever it was, that ranking might be flipped.
And this is, Tom, this is interesting because these are conversations we have now that you're not coaching. When you are coaching, you can't get caught up in these kinds of conversations. You, as a player, as a coach, you have to take care of the business that's in front of you and not worry about anything that's happening.
You do not want to even hear that talk. You're focused on who are we playing next. Get ready, the next play. What's the next play? You're not worried about it. You don't want to hear all that. And you know it goes on because they hear it from everybody. Everybody, they get it from home. They get it from friends. They get it from, guys in the fraternities or, wherever downtown, wherever they are. They're always talking about it, and they get it. And so you just try to keep them focused on what you have to do. And winning takes care of a lot of things.
And as far as the AP goes, in 1994, Penn State beat Ohio State 63-14 and went from 1 to 2 in the AP poll. Yeah. So, maybe the AP poll people have it in first, maybe not.
Well, I think the say not funny, but the strange part of it is the conversations that you hear about 5 and 6, should they be 4 or 3, those now expand out to 13 and 14, should we be 12 or 11, or if you're sitting at 12 and someone from the outside the group of 4 is going to go in there and knock you out, well, we should be 10, we should be 11. So all those types of things. How bad did you beat a team? There's not going to be a lot of let up. When you see Tennessee score 65 in the first half, unfortunately, you're probably going to see more and more of that because you don't want any arguments down the road to come and hurt you when there's people in a room deciding who goes into a 12-team playoff. Those conversations start to expand out even greater.
And the other thing that comes up, too, is as a player, is there anything you can do about it? Then don't worry about it. Just take care of your business.
All right. Well, here's something we can do about our podcast is ask for your fan questions, and you have responded. We have 3 that we want to talk about. Go to NittanyGameWeek.com and please submit your fan questions. We love to hear them. The first one is kind of continuing the conversation that we already discussed as far as Penn State dropping the polls after a bye week. Why do you think they were dropped? Is this SEC bias? And do you think fans should be concerned? This comes from Mike in Port Matilda. No, I don't think you should be concerned because you are going to have some games on your schedule that are going to speak volumes. I think it's great that Illinois has squeezed up into the top 25 rankings at 24. Of course, they do have Nebraska this week, so that's going to be a good matchup on Friday night to see where that goes. But the more you can have respectable opponents on your schedule, and what's hurt Penn State in the past is they've had teams, it's kind of been top-heavy, the Big Ten, Ohio State, Michigan, and then Penn State, and then everybody else. And they didn't really get those top 25 games. So a trip to USC, Jay, that's going to help, all those types of things. So I wouldn't be concerned about it at this particular time.
No.
But as we've mentioned, it might be a conversation to think about in the future.
And I don't think it's necessarily SEC bias, and that'll all sort itself out because a lot of those SEC teams are going to play each other. You know, Georgia plays Alabama, Georgia plays Texas, and Ole Miss is going to play LSU. There's a lot of games. So there's so much football left. And one of the most frustrating things you hear is, whether it's baseball or if the season ended today, this is what the playoffs would look like. Well, the season doesn't end today, and a lot of things are going to happen. So that's what we got.
It is fun.
It's
fun to look at.
But it's called one word: November.
Yeah,
and now December.
Yeah, as they squeeze it even farther, start earlier and later. Okay, now, second question comes from Dan in Pittsburgh. A Pitt fan I know was bragging about how well their quarterback did against West Virginia. That was in the backyard brawl as compared with Drew Aller's numbers. Is he right? I'll let you guys field this one.
You're a quarterback coach, Jay. You handle this.
Compare numbers. I mean, every day is different. You know, playing at Morgantown versus playing at home. You know, for Pitt, he played at home. I watched the Pitt-West Virginia game. The Holstein kid, the quarterback, had a great day. I think he's probably has a good future for them. But, you know, Aller has a great future ahead of him, too. And you can't compare apples to oranges.
He also needed to throw. I mean, yes. Penn State was ahead against West Virginia. If you remember, that was a long delay at halftime. And as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, the running game was so effective, they didn't need to throw the ball quite as well. And, you know, the big long throw to Amari Evans and then the fade route to Trey Wallace helped, you know, extend that lead at halftime. So they came out. They were able to just run the ball. Nick Singleton scores, and, you know, they're way ahead. So they don't have to throw the ball as much. So
apparently, you know, this Pitt fan that's talking, that was a Dan?
Dan in Pittsburgh.
Apparently, you know, Dan, take comfort in the fact that apparently Penn State is living rent-free in that Pitt fans' head. Now, I shouldn't say that because, you know, next time I go to Sinceri's in the Strip, they'll probably charge me double when I get my pepperoni rolls.
Well, you know, we love that Dan in Pittsburgh is paying attention, watching, and that he went on and submitted the question. But I think, Tom, from Dan's perspective, from a lot of people's perspective, they're looking for Drew Aller to really step it up this year. He's looked solid. I love that he's a little bit slimmed down. He definitely looks better as a runner, more elusive. You know, from what you've seen from Drew Aller, and you see a lot of his attributes, you know, what do you look to see, and what are you looking for from an opposing quarterback as a defensive coordinator? See what
I think the one thing you have to look at is he turning the ball over. And he's not turning it over. And you know what? They're running the football. And the great thing, when you can run the ball, you can win a lot of games. Now what's going to start to happen is people are going to pack the box. Yep. They're going to put 8 guys around the ball. He's going to get his shot now because now the whole back end's going to open up for him. So when that day comes, he just has to be ready and perform.
Yeah, the talent is there. It's on display at all times. As you mentioned, there's going to be those moments, that fourth quarter, down the stretch, that they're going to need Drew Aller to come up with a big play, a big run, or to elude the rush and keep his eyes down the field and deliver in clutch time. So that time is coming down the road. All right, thanks to Dan for that question. And then from Megan in New Jersey, who loved the previous podcast and the question you guys answered. I like that. Thank you, Megan. Appreciate the compliment. A couple of weeks into the season, how do you think the Big Ten is shaping up? Are the new teams making this league stronger?
I think Michigan, Michigan, I thought before the year when Penn State, they weren't on Penn State's schedule, I said, this is the year you want them. I mean, because the quarterback situation, they lost so many guys off a really good team. So they're down. I mean, I think they're going to be down. I don't see them being a playoff team. However, I think USC, I think them changing their defensive coordinator has made them a legitimate contender in this league. They beat a good LSU team. We'll see what happens this week against Michigan. I will not be surprised if they go to the Big House and win, and maybe by double digits. I could be wrong. We'll find out. I think Oregon has found their mojo after 2 weeks. They looked a little ordinary. I think Washington is going to be a team that gets better each week, and I think those are important additions. I think Nebraska is playing better than people thought they would. I think that quarterback's going to do some more things, but I think the league is deeper now. Illinois beats Kansas, who was ranked, but Kansas turned around and lost to UNLV, so how good is Illinois? We'll find out next week. So, but I think those teams injected into this league certainly help. Certainly not the level of Texas coming into the SEC injection. But, I think it's
and
important.
Oklahoma, which we'll find out a lot about Oklahoma coming up because they have Tennessee.
You're an old Rocky, and you were Rocky
I'm
Top.
just saying,
I know.
Josh, that's an interesting matchup. Josh Heupel going back and playing Tennessee.
I completely agree.
But Tom, Kurt Signetti with Indiana is there. Illinois, Brett Bielema. I mean, the coaching is excellent in the Big Ten Conference. And I think one thing that gets overlooked is, not having that fifth power conference. There's now the collection of athletes that would go to big-time college football programs. Now there's only 4 conferences to look at. And then when you really look at it, you go, well, there's really only 2 super conferences to look at. So I think the overall depth and overall the talent level from top to bottom in the Big Ten is going to continue to improve as you game plan week after week, coaching-wise as well.
The other thing that hasn't been brought up a lot is the travel.
Yep.
The travel, is very different east to west than west to east. I mean, there's a lot of different things that are going to come down to that, and that's something that's very new, that long of a trip, because it used to be in the Big Ten. It wasn't a trip that was really, earth-shattering. Now there's some long ones.
They rear its head with the USC at Michigan situation, but from that standpoint too, when I mentioned the recruitment of athletes and players I mentioned Bo Prabula. Love the fact that I can't believe we're going out to California in the middle of the season to go play a game. So there's benefits, and then there's the drawbacks, as you mentioned,
because everybody's saying, okay, you got the travel time. Everybody has forgotten. There's bad weather sometimes back east. How long you be out west? There could be a whole bunch of things that are going to pop up here that just haven't happened in the past.
And if you even beyond the Big Ten, you look at the ACC. Cal has already been to Auburn and won. This week they're at Florida State. I think Stanford is at Syracuse on Friday night this week. So, I mean, it's not just the Big Ten, it's also the ACC. And I think the other thing, you talk about the disbursement of talent or the collection of talent. A year from now, right now, if the proposals hold, the football roster, and this is a subject we can get into a bunch in a future podcast, which we will, they're going to cap the rosters at 105. But there is no scholarship limit. So instead of 85 scholarships, there's another 20 guys that Penn State will soak up, and Ohio State will soak up, and Michigan will soak up that may not get to an Indiana, or may not get to Rutgers, or may not get to Maryland, or to Virginia or North Carolina, whatever. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes going forward.
Yeah. Well, those 20 players, too, the interesting thing is, how many times you want to take a chance on a guy as a coaching that did. You're like, oh, darn, look how good he turned out. Yep. But now with those extra scholarships available, it's going to be a lot easier for you to say, hey, let's take a chance on him, especially the lineman. Yep. The lineman who, he's only 240. Is he going to make it to 290? And you don't take him, and then he turns out to be, just a phenomenal talent.
For a program like Penn State and Coach Franklin, he's always preached about competitiveness and practice and competing in everything that they do. So it's going to fall right in line with what he wants as well, to have those extra bodies and those extra scholarships to be able to do and accomplish, hopefully, what they want to accomplish. So a lot of fascinating stuff, I think, from Megan's viewpoint as far as the Big Ten shaping up is fascinating. And to have 18 teams, boy, you don't want to be finishing 18th. Imagine the first team to finish 18th in a conference. You don't want that to happen. But you're going to have teams that are 7th and 8th that are really quality teams that fall within there that are really good games. So we'll see how it all plays out. But I think it's really stepping
Rutgers.
up.
I mean, Rutgers goes to Virginia Tech this weekend. I mean, they're a team coming off 7-6. They beat Miami in a bowl game, pounded them with the run game, and they may have a great year and be 7th in the Big Ten. I mean, that's how deep this league is.
Thanks to Tom and Jay for their time and their insights. A lot of fun. We appreciate you checking it out, and make sure you stay at NittanyGameWeek.com. Check out the depth chart, submit some pride picks, answer the trivia question from our quizmaster, Jay Paterno here. Lots of fun stuff. We really appreciate it as we just get started.